Welcome to Just Relationships, the show that offers you concrete ways to make your relationships better. Whether it's your boss, your spouse, your children, or your friends, the quality of your relationships in life directly affects how you feel about yourself and the success you achieve. Your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer, a psychotherapist, telecoach, author, and seminar leader, will interview top experts to help you learn to manage this essential part of your life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer.
Greetings to you. Well, last week we looked at the idea of being different, of being the only one, of being the oddball. And guess what? If you listened to John Lee last week, you know that there's a lot of goodness there in being the odd one out. If you see things more clearly than others do, and you have a different take, and you don't just buy into a certain herd mentality, or what's also called group think, but you start to reflect on your own, or you listen to people or read people who are reflective. So you will probably be very pleased to hear John Lee again if you tuned in last week. And if you didn't, our show is available on podcast, WHPC 90.3 FM. And welcome back, John Lee.
Thank you very much. Good to be back. I sure appreciate it. I loved our last time and look forward to this.
It's always my pleasure, John, to talk to you. I want everyone to know that I have been a John Lee groupie for, 30 years? Coming to every workshop that you offer, and first learned about your peer primary energy.
Primary emotional energy recovery.
Primary emotional energy recovery, which has a lot to do with the physicality of emotional discharge and a way to ward off rage. Last week, we talked about the difference between anger and rage. Anger is basic and primary and in the moment, and rage is accumulated, unresolved anger tainted by vengeance and ugly actions. So I do think it might be a good idea to just let people know the concept of emotional energy discharge, because what we were saying last week is how if you don't have a forum to express the anger, we were looking at ways you can express anger appropriately, which is coming from the I, the self-knowledge, self-aware. I'm giving a Duffy report. I'm giving a John report, like I'm giving a weather report. This is the world according to me in this moment in time that I'm sharing with you. And that is much more likely to provide for us a forum, a listening ear. However, in a feeling phobic society, as you've talked about, people are afraid of anger. Anger equals pain. So let's be conflict avoidant. Let's not go there. So if you're not in the world of people and trying to get a forum, you provide people with alternative ways. In your book, Growing Yourself Back Up, dealing with emotional regression, there are ways that people can do that. And I remember years ago seeing you on The View. And they made a joke of it, the women on The View. They made a joke of it, the idea of throwing in a towel or, wringing a towel or yelling into a towel. And yet it makes so much sense. Would you mind just explaining that for a moment to people about the physical aspect?
Yeah, the poet William Blake said, energy is pure delight. All animals have this energy that gets stored, and they have to find a way to release it. Modern human beings, used to have multiple ways to release pent-up energy. Sitting at a desk, staring at a computer, sitting in a chair, very often the energy that needs to come out and be dispelled. See, energy creates energy. And yeah, I gave somebody this example. If you've ever seen a horse or a dog and they stumble or fall in some ways, the first thing they will do is shake. They'll literally shake to restore the equilibrium and the balance and redistribute the energy. Well, we did that as kids, and then we'd shake and stuff, and then we were told not to do that anymore. We would cry when we were discomforted, and then we were told not to do that anymore. And we would throw a toy across the room, and we were told not to do that anymore. And little by little, there's not many ways to release energy. So in my book, Facing the Fire and the Anger Solution, I came up with what I call civilized expressions where nobody gets hurt, and try to show people that appropriate anger hurts no one, the one doing it or the one who's watching it done. The other day, I had a guy, he said, I just can't feel my anger. I know it's in there, but I just can't feel it. So sure enough, I pulled out a bath towel and I said, don't worry about feeling your anger, but the towel like you're wringing it out as if it was wet. Twist it as hard as you know you have a right to be angry. And boy, he started twisting that thing, twisted it up into 3 or 4 little knots, and the anger gets released. But originally he was going, I can't feel it. Well, sitting in a chair like I am right now, I'm not activating my body really in any way. I'm activating my mouth and my brain. So, screaming, into a pillow before having a conversation, that releases that pent-up anger and energy, puts you back in your prefrontal lobe and neocortex, and now you can have a constructive conversation or argument. But if you're full of all this energy that never gets released, you're going to stay in fight, flight, or freeze. You're not going to be in your neocortex and prefrontal lobe.
Yes. So I teach this stuff vis-a-vis John Lee, peer primary emotional energy recovery, in all of my communication and conflict resolution courses, because, we look at the 3-part brain and we look at the reality here of, the primitive brain, the dinosaur brain, whatever, which is instant action. And then I explain to people what you just said about the physicality, the yelling, the wringing of a towel. And they're like, oh, I couldn't do that. And I would say to them, you're right. This is countercultural. This is not what we are taught. This is the opposite of what we're taught. But what could be more countercultural than destroying a building or a person? Isn't that pretty countercultural to civilization?
Yes.
Yes.
See, I say to people a lot of times, I say, well, clearly you're really hurt and angry at this person. Have you ever thought about telling them? And very often the answer is, well, no, because I don't want to hurt their feelings or I don't want to upset them. And then my next statement is, now tell me all the ways you hurt them and upset them in little paper cut ways.
Ooh. Instead
of just in 5 minutes and then be done. And yet the truth is whenever somebody says, oh, that would hurt their feelings, I go, listen, you're hurting their feelings probably on a regular basis.
Oh, yeah.
Paper cut ways. And people can so many paper cuts.
I just winced when you said that, John Lee. That is such a powerful metaphor. we know how much a paper cut hurts.
Yes.
And it's such a little thing. It's such an incredibly little thing. I mean, we use the word cutting, that person is cutting, but the idea of paper cut, I love it. Wow. So just tell it like it is. Yeah. And sometimes with my husband, I will try to mask something, but it shows up in my voice, my tone, and my husband will say, "What is it, Duffy?" And I'll say, "You're right. You're right. I was being sarcastic. What I really want you to know is..." Right?
I'm angry or I'm pissed off.
I'm angry, yeah, and just, I'm pissed off. And without even saying, I'm pissed off at you. As we said last week, I'm pissed off. I'm pissed off. Yeah. Which is so much better than being haughty, like I can be. I'm much less haughty now, but I used to be, and I used to lose other people in a barrage of highfalutin words, with my superior education. And so my words were protector parts. I was using them as protectors. And to be plain, I'm pissed off. Yeah. I love it.
I'll have people say, "Okay, tell me what you'd like to say to your wife."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or husband or whatever.
Yeah.
And they'll say 25 sentences. And then I do this little exercise. I go, "Okay, now I want you to say the same thing you just said in 6 words or less."
Yep.
And when somebody is speaking 25 sentences, very often the first sentence that comes out is actually the one they really want to say.
Yeah.
Add 24 more sentences out of fear that one sentence is going to be too big of a blow. And then after the 25 sentences, somebody's going to say, "Well, I'm not following you. What are you trying to tell me?" "Oh, I'm trying to tell you that, baby, that I'm hurt. I'm really hurting right now." Well, again, I said that in 6 words. You're going to say, "What's going on, sweetie?"
Right.
Tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
How can I help? But if I give you 25 sentences, 30 sentences trying to explain it, it ain't going to go too well.
No, it sure isn't, because the other person, it's sometimes called a wall of words, of words.
Yes. I hid behind that wall for decades.
Yes. And then people just react defensively.
Yeah.
So, yes. And so basically, before we close out primary emotional energy recovery, do it in private, take care of yourself. When I first did this work that you introduced me to, John, it was scary because I said, "Oh my God, if I start this, I'll never be able to stop." And of course,
same thing I said when I started.
Yeah. And of course, the point you made was, if you consciously choose to start it, you consciously choose to end it.
That's right.
As well as your body will release and exhaust, and your body needs to decompress.
Yep.
Because it gets so tight. So, folks, get your towels, and also I recommend ventilation writing. Just take a pencil to a paper and use all kinds of X-rated words, and then rip it up. And it must be ripped up afterwards, because this frees up your subconscious and your shadow to be expressed. And we need to know our shadow. Otherwise, our shadow victimizes us. Uh-huh. The old Dr. Jekyll and Ms. Hyde. So we had 2 more distinctions, and I want to make sure I get to them. And that is anxiety versus fear and hope versus joy.
Okay. Again, very educated people will use the words anxiety and fear in the same breath as if they mean the same thing. They just know. Fear, here's a simple way. I go into it much more detail in the book, but here's the simple way. Fear has an object. I'm afraid to fly. then I can go to therapy. Then I can go sit in a plane that's not left the ground. And then I can get on a plane with my coach. And by the time we're done, I do not fear flying anymore. Anxiety does not have an object. See, anxiety can't be attached to any particular thing. And that's what's so difficult about it. Anxiety is basically this way, Duffy. I don't know what's coming, and I don't know where it's going, and there's no therapy under the sun that can answer or help me because I'm anxious about the unknown. I'm fearful about the known. But people will say, oh, no, I'm anxious. And I go, what are you anxious about? Well, I really get scared when dogs come into the room. I go, that's not anxiety, dear. That's fear.
Right.
Well, why is it fear? I go, because I can put the dogs back in the back and now the fear is going to go away. But people will say, oh, no, I'm really anxious when dogs are here. Fear has an object. Fear of flying, fear of relationships, a fear of, you just list it. But again, most people don't treat anxiety. They treat fear. And I just say in the odd one out, you got to treat them differently because they are different.
They are different. And yes, a specific object versus a vague unknown, we call a generalized anxiety disorder, which is the most common garden variety diagnosis, which I give to my patients, my clients, for insurance purposes.
Yep.
It's the most innocuous, and everybody seems to have GAD, right? Generalized anxiety disorder. And I agree with you that it is the unknown. And I always say to my clients, none of us has a crystal ball, except that many people, like these fortune tellers, will look into a crystal ball and see things, right? And that is how we project onto the world what's in our psyche, and we catastrophize, we futurize, and we make up stories, right? We make up stories. And as they say about paranoia, there's always a little truth. What the paranoid person is saying.
Right.
So, our society is headed toward disaster. The stock market is going to collapse. Money won't be worth anything. We won't be able to get food. What do you say to that?
Yeah. See, anxiety is, I just don't know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't. And then you apply that to any area of life. I just don't know what's going to happen. I know that if I'm afraid of have fear around being in a relationship, I know that can be treated. I know what it is. I know who to call Duffy Spencer and say, Duffy, I got a lot of fear around relationships. Can you help me? Yes, I can. But the anxiety, I just can't see far enough down the road and have this generalized anxiety. The second one we talked about is the combination is happiness and joy.
Okay.
That's the combination.
Happiness and joy.
Yeah. So
good. Yes.
Right about in the book is that people wanting to be happy, and people keep telling people they should be happy. And usually what people don't understand is that nobody can stay happy all day long, all week long, all month long. But there's a way in which our culture says, if you do this, if you get that, if you achieve this, then you're going to be happy. It's all what I say is you almost have to go out and get happy. But you can receive joy multiple times during the day and the week. But joy is not a constant. It's something that's received and usually doesn't have to be acquired. People say, "Are you happy in your marriage?" "Oh, yes, quite happy." And I go, you weren't happy yesterday. You were thinking about getting a divorce. Are you happy with the house that you have and the clothes you have? Yeah, they were all acquired. But joy can be sitting out there in that park next to my house and watch the leaves change. I don't have to acquire anything to experience.
Yeah.
I can have joy looking into my children's eyes. It's almost like I just receive that. But this idea that it really is it's really pretty much an American drive is to figure out how to be happy as much of the time as you possibly can. And my take, and the odd one out, is why don't you just absorb the joy that comes towards us a million times a day if we're still and quiet and not striving and struggling to make ourselves happy.
I love this. It's a very significant distinction. Happiness, I need to get or acquire something. And who can be consistently happy? When you think about what does a happy person look like? For some reason, the image of a clown comes to mind, and someone who's, gleeful and jumping around, and who on earth feels that way all the time? You physically cannot.
That's right.
Yeah, so I will be happy if I lose 10 pounds. I will be happy if I get that promotion. I will be happy if my beloved says yes to marriage, whatever that is. Versus I can just look at my beloved now.
Yeah, there you go.
Right? And I can just love my experience Experience.
People have said to me over the years, they go, "John, are you happy? You've done all this work, you've written these books, you've been in therapy since God was a baby. Are you happy?" And I go, I said this for decades. I said, I've never been someone who really, really pursues happiness. But I said, what I've tried to do with the therapy that I've received and my spirituality is to be as joyful as many times a day as I possibly can, because it really does not have to be bought or attained. So that's the distinction.
Choose to experience joy multiple times a day. And I think of it as I do some free expressive dancing, and it's called NIA, which has different definitions of what it means. Let's just say non-impact aerobics, NIA, NIA. But there's one thing that Caroline Coles, my NIA teacher, would say: just put out your arms and just pluck the joy. Just pluck the joy. It's right. Pluck the joy. It's right there. It's right there. Just pluck it. Take it in. It's within reach. It's, to use an expression in coaching, it's low-hanging fruit. Right? I mean, joy is everywhere. And Abraham Maslow talked about peak experiences, that you're just there and you're just receiving the beauty of your beloved or the sunset or life itself, your heart beating, whatever that is. And the more self-actualized you are, according to Abraham Maslow, the more peak experiences you have. So that's another way, I read Maslow so many decades ago, of saying joy.
Yeah.
Right? Peak experiences and joy.
See, I can just go sit out on my porch and watch people walking by. And that's just very joyful. I don't have to buy something to be joyful. I don't have to get online to be joyful. I don't have to go to Amazon to be joyful. I can just sit on the porch and let this stuff come to me, And so this idea of static happiness is a great illusion. And joy, the experience and reception of joy, is the reality. Happiness is the illusion. Joy is the reality.
Wow. I love that. People watching on the porch.
Mm-hmm.
I love to people watch, by the way.
Yeah. People don't do that. People don't do that much anymore. I live in a historic district, and I've lived here in the 80s and now in the 2000s. And in the 80s, when I lived here, people sat on their porch a lot. They spoke to each other on the sidewalk. And now, I mean, literally every house, both sides, has porches. And I've never seen anybody sit on the porch.
That's so interesting that you put it that way, John, because in sociology, we look at the distinction between a front yard and a backyard culture. And we've moved from a front yard to a backyard culture.
Very interesting.
Isn't that interesting? It's such a different concept where everyone is private in their backyards versus the communal people watching. And I love that. I have goosebumps right now thinking about that. And also, I've always loved to people watch. And but I never allowed myself to just associate joy with it. But I do. I find people absolutely fascinating. Of course, I'm a social scientist, behavioral scientist, and you are an author and a writer and a workshop leader and a keynote speaker and all of that. Well, John Lee, I cannot thank you enough.
Oh, it's my privilege. And thank you for having me these two times.
This two-part interview. And you're just remarkable. And keep on keeping on. Keep writing, John Lee.
Okay.
Keep writing.
You keep working.
Yes. Thank you. Odd One Out. Radical Revelations on Relationships, Self-Help, and Personal Growth. And where can we get Odd One Out, John Lee?
You can Amazon and all the other platforms readily have it.
Yes.
Yeah.
John Lee, best-selling author. His first book, The Flying Boy, was a runaway, no pun intended, bestseller. The funny thing about puns right there. Sometimes if I wanted to make a pun, I couldn't. But anyway, thank you again.
You're welcome, Duffy. Thank you so much.
And this is Dr. Duffy Spencer saying goodbye for now and wishing you great relationships.